So I'm going to the gate, fixing the goggles, and he was just cool. And he gets in there and he just took a big breath. And like, this is, I was learning more about like breathing and stuff like that at the time too. So I was like, took a big breath with him, and it just felt like it was like perfect timing, because like, the green doors are in front of you, and it's just this little bit of daylight that's right there. And I listened for the click, and then before the doors open, there's a click. So I kind of give a little intention. It was like boom, and he just broke right away alertly. I'm broke on top. And obviously when the gates open, then that's all out the window.
It's game over.
It's game time. So it's yeah, and then we went on to win, and it was amazing. It was an amazing day. And then after that, I was like, what do I have the sense of being nervous for? I just won my biggest race in my life, and going into any race, I said I should never be nervous.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's going on, FYX listeners? Welcome to episode 62 of the FYX podcast. As always, I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and I am so thrilled to be bringing today's guest to the show. It's one of my very first guests who I have had the pleasure of being able to connect with through my role at the Ford Athletic Club. And that's Nik Juarez. Nik is a professional jockey, and he actually has raced for several years right here in New Jersey at the Monmouth County racetrack, which is only miles away from the fort itself. And I wanted to bring Nik on the show because, one, he has an incredible story. I learned so much about what it's like to be a part of the world of horse racing. He gave me a crash course in it over the course of this episode, and I wanted to sit with him longer and just really get into it and understand more about it, so I can tell you that this will not be the first and only time that he is one of the guests for the FYX. But this episode is special because Nik is gearing up for the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge, which, if you're listening to this the day that the episode goes live, it's actually just over a week away, and he's kicking off next Friday with 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, and he's going to run a path right around Fort Monmouth, right around the Ford Athletic Club, and he's raising money for 2 incredible organizations. He will talk all about it throughout this conversation. He has a pretty lofty goal, and I have so much respect for his commitment to this and his ability to just go 150% in on his effort with every single thing he does, from being a dad to being a husband to being a professional horse racer, and just really growing up in a world that is pretty different. And we talk a lot about, for anybody out there who is an athlete, we talk a lot about what it's like to kind of transition in losing a little bit of your identity as an athlete, whether that's at the high school level, the collegiate level, the professional level. If you played any sport in your life and you were really involved in it, you go through these points where you're not sure how that fits into your picture anymore. And I think that Nik has very clearly done a lot to reflect and self-examine, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. But if you listen to this and you're interested in supporting him in any way throughout the challenge, we would really, really appreciate it if you follow along on the Fort Athletic Club's Instagram, as well as my own Instagram. The Fort's Instagram account is at Fort Athletic Club. I'll put it up on my stories and in my social, so it's easy to find through my own pages. While he's running through his 4-mile challenges over the course of those 2 days next week, it'll be really cool to follow along, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. So with all that said, let's jump right into the conversation and welcome Nik to the FYX podcast. Nik, welcome to the FYX podcast. I'm so excited to have you. I don't know if I told you this, but you're actually my very first Fort member to join the show. I've talked a little bit about the Fort Athletic Club with my FYX listeners, but this is really like the first introduction to some of the faces and people that I get to see and work with on a daily basis. So for that, I'm very excited and super grateful to have you today. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and be the first Fort Athletic Club member. It's pretty cool. So hopefully I'm the first of many, I hope, get a couple more people up here, and just super excited. Since joining the gym, it's been a great community of people, really just bright, energetic people that just want to, they're giving to the community, and, it's a great gym to come into. It's high quality. It's, the best that we have here in Monmouth County, I believe. And it's right down the street from me and right down the street from Monmouth Park. So it's a home run.
Well, I appreciate all that. And as the marketing person, full disclosure, I didn't pay Nick to say that, but that was the best plug that you could have given for the fort. So we're off on a great foot. But really, this conversation today is all about you. It's all about your journey as a jockey, how you got into it. I want to break all of that down and to kind of just bring the listener in and tell them a little bit about your story that they'll learn over the course of this episode. I like to start off all of my podcast conversations with the same question. And that's this. Who is Nik Juarez? But more specifically, why should we care about what you have to say? Tell me, in thinking about this conversation and kind of preparing for it, what you think the listener should have as their big takeaway. Like, why does your story matter?
I think my story matters because it's so similar to others. You know what I mean? It's that I don't think it's now that I've, I was listening to podcasts and stuff like that, and, to kind of get a better understanding that I wasn't the only one, going through a tough time, and there's ways to get out of it. So I don't think my story is much different than any others, except the fact that I'm telling it. And I just want to inspire people the same way I was inspired, and spread light and love. That's all.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. And before we get into it in a little more detail, my signature FYX question. I don't know if you're a coffee drinker. I hope you are, but no judgment if you're not. If you do drink coffee, what's your go-to order that you're sipping on every morning?
I am a coffee drinker.
Good.
However, it has to be scheduled. So it's if I'm scheduling a workout, because I don't know if I get a little anxiety, you know what I mean? I get a little anxious. I'm already kind of an anxious person, so I need high endurance or working out to be able to keep myself pretty stable. So when I add something like coffee, I need to be prepared for a long run or a good workout. That way I know my anxiety's in check. So this morning, I didn't have a coffee because of the podcast. Okay. I started off with some matcha green tea at home.
Nice.
And that's kind of fun to do, just to chill. And it's tasty. It feels good. And I don't know, I feel different. So it's cool.
Well, I'm super impressed because you sound really knowledgeable about coffee from the nutrition standpoint. It totally, just because of the combination of it being a stimulant, it could spike your blood sugar. Mm-hmm. And outside of that, like you mentioned with the anxiety component, it sounds like you may have researched that a little bit on your own to kind of figure out what works for you. So in thinking about your lifestyle and needing to perform, is that something that you've just kind of experimented with to figure out what works, or how did you arrive to that?
For sure. I think the majority of my life has been trial and error. So especially with in this sport of horse racing, I mean, we constantly have to, watch our weight and, you're weighed in every day, multiple times a day. So when you're dealing with that, you have to be mindful of the supplements that you're taking, or any type of fluids that you're taking. So I just found the balance in that and what works for me, days if I needed to start with just water, or a day that I can't do water, you know what I mean, because if I need to reduce. So maybe before I get into the sauna, we call it the hot box, you take a little sip of coffee because then you get caffeine, you get hot, and then you get in there and you already start sweating so I can start reducing right away. So I love coffee, you know what I mean, and especially after leaving the gym, going to Rook, I'll get a Bali or a Sumatra or something like that. But it's all about balance.
Yeah. And shout out to Rook. I was just sipping on my Rook coffee right before we hit the record button. For those of you who are listening who live in New Jersey, I think I've plugged Rook a couple times. It is my favorite coffee spot.
That's your basic post when you put the Rook cup and bang, you take a picture for the gram. You know what I mean?
So true. I'm on a strawberry mocha kick right now. It's one of their seasonals.
I gotta try
I wasn't expecting to like it. I'm more of a traditional kind of coffee person, like you're describing. I don't put a lot in it. And one of our clients here actually mentioned to me that she was like, oh, you have to try the strawberry mocha. So I did. And it's kind of the best way I could describe it is a chocolate covered strawberry. It's really good.
You know what though? I am a sucker though for iced coffee too.
Yeah. I will drink iced coffee regardless of the temperature.
Especially when you go to Rook, because you can get like the whole jug, and then I can have it at home, and like maybe I'll buy like an oat milk or like an almond milk or something at the house and mix it up, and then I have that like on a summer day. Oh yeah, then
I'm so with you, and I'm like, I always joke with people. Actually, I've had a lot of people on the show, so I feel I'm not alone in this statement, who always say it doesn't matter what temperature it is outside. It can be -2 degrees, and they'll still drink a cold brew or some kind of variation of an iced coffee. That's so me.
Yeah, my agent is the same exact way. I mean, whether it's freezing cold up here or we're like in Florida, hot day, it's always a nice coffee. So it's he's funny. Yeah, good guy.
Yeah. Well, I know we could talk about coffee for forever, but we came on to talk about you and about a couple initiatives you have going on right now. But before we get into that, I really, in full transparency, I don't know a lot about horse racing. I was preparing for the episode, started to do some research. You're very well decorated in the sport. You've had a bunch of different horses and you grew up in this environment. And I was thinking about how I wanted to open this up. And the only thing I could think of when I thought of a jockey or horse racing or anything like that was watching Seabiscuit. And like that is truthfully, my only knowledge of what is probably not exactly what it's like to be in the world of horse racing. So for the listeners out there who might be like, break it down for us, they may think, oh, same thing. Like they only have seen that movie, or they only know about like Preakness, or, a lot of people in the New Jersey area, they've been to a couple horse races, that we live close to a lot of the cities that host them. But they're certainly not into it in the day-to-day the way you are and as a professional. So how did you get a part of this world?
So I'm a 3rd generation jockey, 4th generation horseman. It's coming from both sides of my family. My father was a jockey, and then on my mother's side, my grandfather was a jockey, rode jump races as well, like steeplechase.
Cool.
He was the outrider in Maryland for 35 years, which is like the head of the racetrack, and like on horseback. While they're on horseback, they catch like loose horses, and they're there for safety and stuff like that. But real cowboys,
Yeah.
And then my great grandfather on my mother's side, he trained horses, and so my grandfather rode for him. So it's been in my blood. Throughout my entire life. It's not something I really wanted to do as a kid.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, it wasn't something I really wanted to do as a kid. My sister was more into the horses. I was younger, riding dirt bikes and, being reckless and having fun. And, and I always wrestled through high school. So I always, watched my weight and stuff like that. And, wrestling teaches you a lot of physical discipline, mental toughness. I mean, I think it really teaches you a lot, and that's applicable to life as an adult. So when I graduated high school, I wasn't growing anymore. I don't know if you guys can't tell how short I am, but I'm pretty short. But so I wasn't growing anymore. I knew how to cut my weight, so I thought I'd give riding a shot.
Okay.
I did 1 semester in college because my dad was like, college first. He always wanted me to go to school.
Sure.
Did a semester in college. I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't for me, and I didn't want to waste the money. So I said, let me just try horse racing, and I really committed to it, and long story short, everything really just worked out. I mean, there's more in depth to the story of how I got to where I'm at today, but it was a big struggle. You know what I mean? And nothing like, as being a jockey, we're self-employed, so you're only making money if you're riding, and you're only making money really when you win. You know what I mean? So, anyways. I lost my train of thought.
What was that exposure like, to your point of what you just said about you're self-employed? I mean, I could totally relate to that with the fitness industry. I think that model has changed over the years, whereas yours has probably stayed the same. But like that pressure to always be on and always be working and always trying to be getting better at your craft, it just feels like you can never have that off switch. And I think that's something that's challenging to struggle with. But in your case in particular, I'm curious how that might have influenced you as a little kid, because I imagine you observed that with your dad.
Oh, yeah. And within the sport, it's, like I get back onto the mental toughness thing about wrestling, beginning in my career, like I said, it's tough. You're self-employed. You get up every day, you work. You don't get paid for work when you work in the mornings. So you get up every day with a smile on your face, go do your job and, go see everybody. And no matter what happened the day before, you just got to smile, keep moving. And that's how it is in horse racing too. I mean, I ride during the summer. If there's a 14 race card, I'll ride 12. So that means every 20 minutes I'm changing. I'm changing my clothes. I'm washing my face. I'm reading my program. I'm getting prepared for the next race within 20 minutes. So it's, you might see an owner and a trainer and you go out for that race and you guys win and you're so excited and stuff. But when you get back, you got to wash your face, put your clothes on for the next pair of silks for the next owner. And you go out them, go see them with the same respect and go out there to go do your best job. And vice versa. Let's say if the horse loses, you know what I mean? And sometimes you get called certain things, that's the job. You're an athlete and stuff like that. So, people want to have the finger to, somebody needs somebody to blame. So a lot of times we're the first person to point at. So to deal with that, like I said, you got to come back, wash your face, put on a new pair of silks, go out. Hey, how's it going? Smile and just go about your business. So it takes an incredible amount of mental toughness, I believe, and resilience. Yeah. And not everybody makes it. And that's the reason why, I began my career with many apprentice jockeys, and I've watched apprentice jockeys over the years that joined us, and and then you never see them again. So it's I think you just got to be resilient and just keep showing up, and just like anything else in life, you know what I mean? And that's, so to give a little more about horse racing, it's really not much different, It's applicable to everybody's lifestyle, and it's an awesome sport and filled with great people. And I have a huge love for horses. I'm an off the track thoroughbred owner, which means it's a horse I used to ride, and one of my biggest races on him took me to the Breeders' Cup, took me to Florida, the whole 9 yards. He made over $1 million. Is
that your horse? I looked up a few of your horses. Valid.
That's my man. Yeah. So he was the one who
cool
really
names.
He really set
actress.
Actress. We won the Black Eyed Susan, but Valid, he has a special place in my heart, and he he really set my career off here, and now I own him, and he's at my mom's house in Maryland at the farm, and I just can't wait to be able to put my son on his back.
Yeah, that's really cool. I want to talk more about that side of it, because I'm kind of hearing the two components from you of what it's actually like to be in the athlete's shoes as a jockey, but then also some, maybe even a little bit of the politics and that sort of thing, because I would have to guess that there's a lot. But I want to go back to what you just said about this idea of resilience, and you go through a race, 20 minutes later, change out your silks, and you're on to the next. How, in your case, obviously you got into this because of your family, right? Mm-hmm. But kind of walk me through, let's say you mentioned apprenticeships, you referred to that a little bit of if somebody just truly loves horses and maybe they grow up horseback riding in some capacity, but then they're looking at wanting to pursue something like that as a professional career, what does that process look like? Because I don't think that the average person understands that. Whereas we hear the stories all the time of, say, how did LeBron James get into the NBA? Right. That, what the draft looks like, what the NFL draft looks like. What is that like in your world?
That brings me to something real quick. That was a goal of mine, I think, in years to come, is to be able to scout for jockeys. Okay. That hasn't been done before in the United States.
That's not a
It's
thing.
everybody's coming over from, foreign countries, Latin America and stuff like that. And it's very difficult for the American jockey to get up and running. We have one school in the United States, the North American Racing Academy.
Where is that?
But it's in Kentucky, and I believe it costs 60-some thousand, you know what I mean? But I'm not against it, but I haven't seen anybody really become prominent out of there, you know what I mean? But these guys that are coming from Puerto Rico and Venezuela and Panama and, all these different countries, that they go to school and they're being paid to go to school to learn how to be a jockey. And then they come here, they've already ridden 50 some races down there.
And
so they're
growing up
well polished. They're growing up in it. So they're very well polished. So for the American kids listening, or somebody, the American kid, you as in the proper weight and stuff like that, or can get to the proper weight safely, the best way is, you start out at a farm, you're galloping horses. Well, first you work with horses. I did the stalls, I cleaned everything, I cleaned the tack, did all that kind of stuff. And then once I was able to be efficient at that, taking care of the animal, then I could ride.
And did you do that? Because I know you mentioned, sorry to cut you off, but just to give us a little more understanding of your timeline, I know you mentioned that you didn't really commit to this until you were about 19, maybe 18, 19, right? So I would assume that you were probably doing some of those things and taking care of the horses when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Sounded like you weren't super into it. Maybe your sister was a little more than you. So did you kind of like take all those steps back at 18, 19 years old and start from ground zero?
Yeah, I started from ground zero.
Okay.
So like the bottom job, I guess you could say at the racetrack is called a hot walker. It's like a person who just walks the horses.
Yeah.
And that's what I was.
Okay.
And then my dad, he was galloping, which is like the exercise rider. They train the horses for the races. So I see his check one day in the office, and I was like, man, I can do that. You know what I mean? I was like, my feet hurt. I'm walking so much. I was like, I can ride one. So I was like, Dad, I want to learn how to ride. So he sent me to a farm, and that's when you need to have little connections and stuff like that too, to be able to find people that are going to give you the opportunity. You know what I mean? Because you're green, you don't know what you're doing yet, so you need to get on horses that are equal to that. You can't just get on a racehorse and just start off. So that's how the process started. I was 18, 10 months walking horses. By the time I'm 19, now I started working at the farm, and was at a farm for 3 months, learning how to gallop. At that point, then I would come on Sundays. My dad was the foreman for this trainer, and there's Sundays. You must have
some fun memory because you're smiling.
Yeah, so Sundays were his day off, but were the day off, so the trainer wasn't there. But this trainer didn't pay attention so much, so Saturday he would save like 2 or 3 horses for Sunday. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so that way, when the trainer was gone, I could ride him. So he was just testing out to see, like, he's like, I want to see if you're good enough to be on the track yet, like if you're safe. So it's like 3 weeks we did that, and he said, you're good. So then we start galloping on the track, and you start galloping, and then galloping is just like galloping like a jogging speed. You know what I mean? And then then you have to learn. It's called breezing, a working speed. So they're pretty much going race speed, but you're supposed to be able to gauge it. So you have to have a clock in your head, so it's like for a half mile to work, like easy, nice and slow, 50, 51 seconds. 50 flat is perfect. 49, now 48, you're going too fast. You know what I mean? So you got to be able to feel in your hands or in your body, like, that you're going that quick.
How do you develop that? Is that just from reps?
I don't know.
Do you feel like it's an innate thing that maybe is literally in your blood with describing your family history?
So I think it was a bit of a natural ability. Okay. My first time breezing a horse was with my dad, and that was just in company. And then the second time I went to breeze a horse, it was the leading trainer in Maryland, and they were in Virginia at the time, but he had 60 horses in Maryland, and they just needed somebody light to get on the horses to work them without commitment.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because most of the time, if a jockey works in the morning, they got to ride in the afternoon. They're going to ride in the afternoon, usually. It says, I scratch your back, you scratch mine type thing. But if a trainer wants it to be uncommitted, maybe they want somebody else that couldn't work the horse, they're going to find an exercise rider or something. Okay. So my second time breezing a horse, they told me to go this speed. I don't know what I'm doing, you know what I mean? Boom, boom. I hit it perfect. I come back, the assistant trainer, she said, come back tomorrow. I got 2 more for you. I said, okay. So I breezed them. Perfect again. So I was like, man. So after that, I became the guy's breeze rider. So the only thing I was doing was breezing horses. So then I really developed a clock very, very quickly, and it was within a short amount of time. And I was breezing really good horses that you get that opportunity. You know what I mean? And I was blessed to have that. And then then when you start riding, you have to have that same clock in your head, and it's like, when you're on the lead or whatever, and you can't go too fast. You have to pace yourself. And then you also have to know, reading the form, I have to know what's coming behind me and who's coming behind me. Mm-hmm. And usually I can know when they're coming by past performances. So that's what the program is when I do my homework for past performances.
So you're studying a lot of other races to really kind of gauge the competition. There's a lot of scouting of both the jockeys and the horses together and how they ride together, right?
Yeah, for sure. Going into a race, I mean, you're looking at the program, figuring out, first of all, what your horse's running style is, whether he's a front runner, whether he's going to be right off the pace, mid-pack, or he's going to be closing, coming from behind. Okay. So, you try to gauge that out, and then I'll mark every horse what their kind of running style is, and then you have to look at fractions of time, and then really you can base who's really going to be mid-pack, who's going to be your closer, who's going to be your, who's going to be on the lead, and that's just your estimation, you know what I mean? And then the gate, that's the first thing is what I do, the program. I look over that, and then I make note. Most of the time I find myself on the lead or close to the lead. So then I make note of the colors Like if I know the guy's coming from mid-pack or closing and his horse has red blinkers on or a white bridle or he has a red different type silks on, I know when I'm sitting in the lead, I'm kind of keeping an eye, my peripherals.
Oh, you're looking for those colors.
Because that way I'm pacing.
That's a way you identify.
I can identify. So I can pace.
I never knew that was so calculated.
I can pace and wait. And when I see them come before they can make a jump on me, I make the jump. You know what I mean? So, there's a lot to it. And so that's what I do even before I go out the door. And then when you get to the paddock, obviously the owner and the trainer, they have their input in their plan A. And that obviously whatever they say is plan A.
Sure.
Plan B is my option, is because when the gates open, you never know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The horse might stumble, or the horse you thought was going to be on the lead, he might stumble. So now you inherited the lead without you thinking. So now you got to go to plan B. Who was supposed to be here? And if he broke slow, who's supposed to take his spot? And so it's all things you got to think of real quick, and you have to do it subtly. You know what I mean? When I look at it, like some riders, especially when you're younger, you're kind of flustered and stuff like that, and they're doing too much.
As you're describing this, I'm thinking in my head, like, how would I manage all of this? Like, I was a swimmer, so I can relate to this concept of time, right? And especially when you were talking about, like, the timing of when to be at certain points within the rest of the pack, there's a little bit of that in swimming when it comes to more of your endurance events, like, say you're swimming what we call like a 500 and you can't sprint the whole thing because you'll be dead. So I can like wrap my head around that. But some of the other components that you're describing with like the colors and what to look for, like I feel like my head would be spinning the first time. Like think about the adrenaline of the race. And then you're also dealing with the emotions of the horse and like the relationship between you as the jockey and the horse and feeding off of that. Horses can sense when you're anxious, right? So talk to me about that. What is that like? Like you were just about to mention what it's like as a new jockey versus a seasoned jockey. So maybe you can kind of use that as an example. So,
a lot of times, when I'm having a good year, I ride 1,000 horses per year. Wow. So I'm riding and the majority of the time you might ride those horses maybe 2 or 3 times, like the same one. But, I'm riding like 800 horses per year.
So not only do you need to be resilient, you need to be pretty like flexible and just kind of roll with it, right?
Pretty flexible. And then also you gotta get a feel for them quickly. Okay. You know what I mean? Because if you don't have, majority of the time, you don't get on them in the mornings, So the first time you see the horses in the afternoon, right. You see it on paper. Okay. I look at everything on paper. And then you get there, it's the first time seeing the horse, you jump on. Maybe the trainer might give you a few tips. Hey, he does this, he does that. But I like to take all my horses away from the pony, which is, you'll see when you go to the races. When you go to the races, you'll see there's a lead pony with a racehorse. Okay. And I just don't think they get such a great. They're more comfortable being next to the lead horse, but I don't think they get such a good warm up. So being a seasoned rider, I like to take them away from the pony, feel them out a little better, get a warm up, get a feel for like how they are by themselves. You know what I mean? And then you get a feel in your hands. You can feel if they're going to be tough, they're going to be relaxed. And then I like to play with, in the post braid, I'll put my horse behind another horse's heels. Because let's say I know that horse is going to be running mid-pack. So I need to know if this horse is going to be, if I can drop his head. You know what I mean? Like instead of, a lot of riders have the misconception, or people have the misconception when you're running up behind the horse, you got to hit the brakes. The problem with that is that it puts the horse's head
upright, and then they're not that.
They lose vision.
Okay.
They lose the vision. They clip heels, and they can go down.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But if you look at horses in the wild, like a herd of horses, you never see like one in the middle of the pack just like clip heels and go down, because they just don't do it. So they're natural herd animals, and they should relax behind another horse. So like I play around with that in the post braid too, and seeing all horses are different. And 98 out of 100 will hit the brakes behind another horse's heels because they don't want to go down. Okay. Because it's an instinct. Self-preservation is what I call it. So that way I know in a race I can put them behind pack and I can throw their head away. I can keep them completely relaxed the whole way.
So that's your job as the jockey. That's like where you're leveraging their skill set and power as the horse, but that's where you come in and really manage that.
Correct. Okay. So like you get you get a feel for them, and like and some of them are more nervous than others, and sometimes you just gotta. And sometimes it comes from you, like you were saying. Like, so with a younger rider, sometimes, they might kick their feet out of the irons and they're all real tight and holding the mane. And, they're just, everything's just like real nervous. And it's just like, man, relax. Maybe fake it till you make it. Start petting them, like good boy, good girl. And then like, next thing you know, you might relax and the horse is going to relax as well. So, Can
you remember a time in maybe the beginning of your career when you were a more nervous, just less experienced rider?
Oh, for sure.
Is there an event that sticks out in your mind where maybe the race didn't go as you had expected it because you really didn't know what to expect with that horse? Like, there's only so much preparation you can do from what I'm hearing. Because you could do all the research and study all of this, but sometimes the horse might be in a certain mood that day, right?
Correct. But what bring me back to Valid was that this is when like all my nervousness like diminished. This is the biggest race of my life. At that time, it's a grade 3, the 150,000 Philip H. Island here at Monmouth Park. It's my first.
So it's right in New Jersey.
Yep, right
nice.
here. It's my first time riding in a graded stake, which is we have graded stakes, and then it goes down the list. But that's the top, and it was great. I just lost my apprenticeship 3 days before that. And I'm so nervous in the post parade, and
because you had a lot riding.
I had a lot riding on it.
Apprenticeship.
Yeah, because when you lose your apprenticeship, if you don't make it after day like year 1, day 1, you're pretty much out. You know what I mean? Like people use you when you're an apprentice because it's less weight.
Sure.
So we'll get back on that. It's a weight allowance for having an apprentice. So it's my first time, in a graded stake, and I just remember I'm so nervous and. Valid was just so cool. He was like, he's won stake races before, big graded stake races. So like, I'm like, he doesn't care who's on his back. You know what I mean? It's not even about me. This is horse racing. That's another thing that jockeys have a misconception of, is that we're the stars of the sport, or, it can't run with us. It's horse racing. You know what I mean? We're expendable. It's the truth. And it was just, I look at him, he was like stoic almost, and I said, you know what? He's done this before me. And he's probably going to do it without me.
Yeah.
Do it after me. So I just got to do my job the best I can today and let him do what he does. And because he knows what he's doing. I don't,
right.
You know what I mean? I knew what I was doing, but technically he was the professional.
But having literally just basically met him, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard to establish that kind of trust in 20 minutes?
Less than that.
Right.
Yeah,
so
less than that.
I think that's a really respectable perspective that you have there. So you got on the horse, you were with Valid, and what happened like once you realized that everything you just described? Like, he was calm, he was collected.
By the time I realized that, we're walking towards the gate, and that's when the nerves are really getting you, and then you're putting your goggles down, because we run with like sets. We have multiple sets of goggles to prepare for dirt. We have to change goggles throughout the race.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Okay. So
a lot of logistics,
I'm preparing going in. You got to make sure your bands aren't overlapping, because you can make the mistake of pulling one down, you pull them all, and that's no good. And you get dirt in the eyes. But so I'm going to the gate, fixing the goggles, and he was just cool. And he gets in there and he just took a big breath. And like, this is, I was learning more about like breathing and stuff like that at the time too. So I was like, took a big breath with him, and it just felt like it was like perfect timing, because like the green doors are in front of you, and it's just this little bit of daylight that's right there. And I listened for the click, and then right before the doors open, there's a click. So I kind of give a little intention. It was like boom, and he just broke right away alertly. I'm broke on top. And obviously when the gates open, then that's all out the window.
It's game over.
It's game time. So it's yeah, and then we went on to win, and it was amazing. It was an amazing day. And then after that, I was like, what do I have the sense of being nervous for? I just won my biggest race of my life. And going into any race, I said I should never be nervous. And yeah.
That's really cool. And you just gave such a really colorful visual and describing the experience of like what it's like right before you're about to start the race. And you touched on breathing and mentioned that you were just kind of learning about it. It sounds like maybe now, a couple years later, that's something that might be a part of your ritual or practice. So talk to me about, let's transition into some of the fitness and nutrition.
Yeah.
And talk about, from the fitness perspective, even wellness, I think is a more appropriate term to describe what we're going to get into in this section. But what is that like for you in terms of thinking about your training on your physical self?
So going into breathing, going into like a vinyasa flow or something like that. So
I love
yoga. Really got into yoga a few years ago, and it has been a real godsend. It's great mentally, physically. It's so great for me when I ride. Because a lot of times, you're riding so much, and especially at that time I was riding like 7 days a week. You're running, reducing weight. It just never ends. And it's just pace all the time. And like I said, like the 20 minutes of wash your face, next race, go home. What do you know what I mean? It's like it just never felt like it was ending. And then I go to my first yoga class, and like I do, you get the very end of Savasana, and I fall asleep.
Who pushed you to go to your first yoga class, or you just kind of decided on your own?
I think I just went on my own and started going on my own in Florida. And great studio down there, Bend and Breathe in Hollywood, Florida. And like it was just really nice. It was like a yin yoga class, and like
restorative.
Restorative. And it was just like something I needed to slow down. And I realized I was like, I'd rather go to a yoga class for an hour than take a nap for an hour. And I feel much more refreshed. I feel better about myself, and it gives me time to reflect. And through practicing, just off the mat, meditation and stuff, and, finding those thoughts that come by, and thoughts I feel like are like subtitles in like a movie or something. And if you continuously read the subtitles in the movie, you miss the bigger picture. You understand? Yeah. So it's like sometimes you do need to like notice the words going by. Sometimes you do need to notice those thoughts going by, but it's like you don't need to give your whole attention to it. So and that's what I found with yoga. So it's like I'm able, between yoga and meditation and running too. I mean, now I find myself where like thoughts pass by, subtitles are passing by, I recognize them, and it's like, is it something I need at this moment, something I can catch on for later on throughout the day, let it pass by, and like I'll get to it, but it's like I just needed a rest. Like your mind needs a rest sometimes.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. I think I've had some other guests that I've interviewed. We've talked about meditation and just the misconception that it's about the idea of trying to have a blank mind. And it's not. It's actually about acknowledging that a thought is there. In your example, this concept of subtitles, I love that. And I think it's really cool that you kind of like picked up on that in doing yoga. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd imagine that one of the kind of secrets, for lack of a better word, when it comes to your success as a jockey is when you're on that horse, you can't be thinking about other random things. Yeah. And I'm sure the other random thoughts do download while you're racing, but has that been a good tool for you to kind of manage that?
Absolutely. It's been a great balance between work, relationships, everything. With work, I can be able to, actually, let those thoughts pass by, and when I get home, I'm able to leave work at work, and vice versa. So, and it's the same thing like I'm saying in a relationship, is that there's so much stress, from my job and stuff. My wife didn't cause the stress, you know what I mean? So it's like she doesn't need to hear it all. So it's like you got to be able to balance that. My wife's great, super supportive, and she hears me out all the time, and sometimes I ramble on and then realize like there's other better things to talk about, and that's just part of letting go of things.
Well, let me ask you this. When you guys met, did she have any knowledge of horse racing?
Yeah, so she actually comes from a horse racing family too.
So how much does that influence your relationship, you think?
Good and bad.
Okay, tell me the good, and then we'll talk about the bad. Let's go there.
Because
what's the good?
The good is is that she knows about my job. So like she knows the risks that I take. She knows the hours that I put in. She knows the stress that I can be under, and she's able to understand it. And then so it's much easier for me to explain things to her about the racetrack and things that other people don't know. So it's nice that we have something to relate on, and but it doesn't need to be our whole life either, because we love other things. And we have a beautiful son, Nicholas, and
he's so cute.
We have a little girl on the way in June. So we have so many other things to to keep our heads wrapped around. But it's good having somebody in the business. The bad, there's, let's say like maybe I guess in any sport or athletes in general, maybe sometimes have not the best reputation for being family men, or family, like a loyal, I'm going to say it, loyal people.
Partner.
Yeah, loyal partner. And, I think a lot of that, the uncertainty sat with her for a while. We've been apart now since September 2020. And, like I said, obviously being the business that I'm in, I'm sure that really worried her, but, I'm a person that's really focused, and, she changed my whole life. And, I've been going down this journey of running with her too. So it's really cool. And, I love her so much. And, yeah, she's awesome.
Now, I know the backstory, if you're willing to share it, about why you guys have been apart for as long as you have. And it seemed like it was kind of unexpected from the little bit that you told me. So if you're willing to talk a little bit more about it, what has, with you being here and being so focused on your career, and not only your wife, but now your son and future daughter really far away from you, literally countries away, what has that been like, and kind of under the circumstances that it happened? So before you tell me how you feel about it, just kind of give the listener the context of your guys' situation.
Yeah, so funny, this is social media too, but her and I, we met on Instagram.
You did?
Yeah, we met on Instagram.
I was going to ask the story behind how you met.
We met on Instagram, started talking. She came to visit me in Florida in 2019.
So she was living in Sweden at the time?
She was living in Sweden at the time. She came over in December 2019. It was great. Went to Walt Disney World, did the whole thing. And, at that time, though, I was... I think I was battling some mental things myself at the time, and like things that she obviously unknowingly, she didn't know. And obviously when you're talking just over social media, like you don't disclose everything.
And you had an injury at this point, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm coming off of a great meet at Monmouth Park. I was second leading rider, win like 107 races. In the midst of everything, I tore my meniscus. And I'm going into the winter in December, and like I just wasn't in the right headspace, and like my weight's going up, and I just didn't. It was hard to put my socks on, my left leg, so it was getting bad. But like with horse racing, you just keep pushing on. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like the only.
But
time...
it sounds like from what you described and just the frequency of getting on horses, like. It's like being a linebacker and taking a beating every time you play in an NFL game. Like you're how much do these horses weigh? Like you're managing 1,200
pounds,
beast.
And you're managing that. And then it's also, I think it's just the malnutrition in jockeys.
Okay.
It's the lack of nutrition from reducing the weight, That's when I was getting the worst. But like I said, now with running, my weight's perfect and I feel great. I'm lifting weights. Before I was scared to go in the gym. I didn't want to put on too much muscle. But instead, it's like that's something that riders need to know. Like, get in the gym. The reason why your back is sore is because you're weak. I'm sorry to tell you, but like the reason why your hip flexors are sore is because you need to stretch, and you're probably weak in there too. So it's like maybe you could work your hip flexor hurts. Work on your adductors or your adductors or your back or something else. Work on your quads, and maybe it'll alleviate the stress in your hip flexors. But a lot of jockeys, they have too much pride to take any advice. So it's like I've always wondered, like there should be some type of personal coaching in horse racing, but it's like my dad and I said, like these guys, they just don't care,
Yeah, it's I'm kind of deviating. I'm gonna go back to the story, but it's surprising to hear that, especially over the course of like the last 2 to 3 years, as I think, and maybe this is my bias of like the information that I intake on social media and who I choose to surround myself with. But I think the conversation around athletes and their mental health as it's tied to like how they feel physically has become more and more prominent. I'm surprised that there isn't a coach out there that really specializes in that, because I mean, shit, I've probably had like 10 various versions of mindset coaches on my podcast, and they're really targeted more towards your quote unquote general population or everyday person. But you then see all these niche coaches. Like I'm actually really, really surprised to hear that. So
yeah, like me,
maybe you're onto something to create when you retire.
That's what I want to do. Like I've always had that idea. Even when I first started in the sport, I'm like, when I was going through tougher times, like, man, there should be like a psychiatrist or something in here for somebody to talk to. You know what I mean? Like there's nobody for anybody to talk to. And these guys, that like I said, are coming from foreign countries and, not knowing how to manage money. They don't speak English. Like I can't imagine how overwhelming that must be as well. So like they should be like a bilingual psychiatrist or a counselor, like somebody that we should be able to talk to, like, or somebody that comes in it's sometimes they have a chaplain in some racetracks, but like
Okay.
it should be a guy that comes in, hey, how are you doing? And kind of keep up with us. I mean, there's not so many in the room that they couldn't keep up with us and like keep up on our mental health, you know?
Sure.
And I think that's something the sport really needs. And I hope it comes about one of these days. You know
And
what
so
I mean?
in kind of maybe bottling up some of your own stuff, did that then start to show up in some way in your relationship?
Correct. So now it's like I was super stressed and dealing with like I love riding, but I hate I like riding
When you're winning.
but I love winning.
Yeah.
You know what
Sure.
I mean? I hate losing.
You're a competitor.
Yeah, so
of
it's
course.
like
I hope you love winning, right?
yeah,
Well,
I do.
It's gotta
So
drive you.
it was
Yeah.
just getting really tough going in the winter of 2019, and then we're talking. Her and I were talking, and when she came over, right away I planned a trip to Disney World. Just trying to cover up a little of my sadness a little bit, I think. And but things were great, and she was just a great person right off the bat when I met her. And she left after like 3 weeks, came right back, and then a couple weeks later I went to Sweden, and then that's when I took the time off for my knee.
Okay.
Just got some shots in my knee. I skipped surgery, just wanted to rehabilitate it as best I can myself.
Meniscus,
Strength,
right?
yeah, but
Okay.
strengthen up everything else around,
Sure.
help myself out. And so that's when I took the time to do that. And then we were literally in Sweden Thursday, March 12th. We were supposed to leave Friday, March 13th. Donald Trump came on the news, a press conference that day, Thursday, March 12th, that they were shutting the borders down.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had to flight for the next day, so we would have been locked out. So her mom wakes us up, not my mother-in-law at the time. Her mom wakes us up. Boom, we run to the airport. We make it back. We had to go to Paris. They were stuck there we almost missed the plane in Paris. Get all the way to the United States. Then we were in the United States, but when she got to the United States, she had her typical ESTA visa, 90-day visa, which is a tourist visa. And it's given to select, there's like 20 some countries, I think, in the world or around there. But like the Scandinavians, so Sweden, like all the places around there, they're exempt and they get the ESTA visas. So she comes over, and now she's there for about 2.5 months, like 2 months. But in Florida.
Okay.
But borders are closed.
Right.
So the EU said that they're going to close it for at least 2 years. And that means when she left on her ESTA, she'd have to leave within her ESTA and go back, and we didn't know we were going to see each other.
Right.
So we decided, I was like, I think this is the person I want to be with. This is the person I want to be with for the rest of my life. And we decided to get married. And so we got married May 20th, 2020. And she was supposed to leave the beginning of June to go back to Sweden. That's when the ESTA expired. But she stayed under the guidance of our attorney, saying that it was okay for her to stay in the country, although she overstayed the ESTA visa, but she's awaiting the green card. However,
she was already in the process.
Right, because she's in the process.
Okay.
However, she was in the process, and he did say, you can't leave the country while you're in the process. So, now we're still in Florida in June 2020. I bought a house up here in 2019 in Oceanport.
Because at this point you'd already been racing for a couple of years in Monmouth, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I won the title here 2017, leading apprentice here 2014-15. And then so I bought a house up here in Oceanport, and so we moved back up here. And COVID just, I know we can't blame everything on COVID, but
it changed
COVID,
everything.
man, he messed everything.
It affected your personal life, and it had to have affected your industry directly too.
Yeah.
Just like it did the fitness industry.
Yeah, for sure. And like we didn't open until like July 1st here in Monmouth, and
That's
usually
already a couple months into your typical season,
right.
correct?
That's 2 months into my season, so it's like you're not going to pick up as much steam. Plus, I'm coming off an injury. So it wasn't a great year that summer either. And then, then last winter, so then I had to sell my house in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So I sold my house in Florida. We get to like August 2020. Now, back up. A week after we got married, we find out she's pregnant with Nicholas. So that was awesome news. And so now we're going through the summer up here. obviously I'm under like, my stress of like moving, just sold my house, moving things up. She's stressed, first time in the country, you know what I mean?
I was gonna
Like,
ask, like, prior
can you
to your
imagine?
relationship, did she really spend much time in the US at all?
No, that's
and under really, honestly, for lack of a better word, bizarre circumstances with COVID.
Correct.
Like, this was not a way to experience the US for the first time. That's for damn sure. Yeah.
So I can't imagine the stress that she was going on, that she was under.
Just the uncertainty for
uncertainty, and like me trying to like get business going, and like I just wasn't. Like, it just wasn't. She was very upset. Like, she was stressed, and I was stressed too. And I don't blame her. And she wanted to go back home. And Sweden's a great country, and they got great health care.
And her family's there.
And her family's there. My in-laws are there, so she went back home to my in-laws, and she's there. She left in September 2020, and she left, and it was like, it felt real empty. You know what I mean? And I thought before it was like, it was just so stressed and everything else. And then like when I realized, like, when the most important thing was away from you, like everything kind of like the dust just settled. And I realized like all the other things really weren't important.
You also lost racing for a while at the same time.
Yeah.
So how did you, the professional component and the personal, you're describing like two big rocks that shape your identity. So how did you deal with that?
So that was the next word I was gonna say, is like I felt like I lost my identity. You know what I mean? I was my identity as I've been a jockey since 2013, and my whole life has been revolved around it. And it's it's put everything else at bay in my life. So it was like, to get it all taken away, it felt like it was all slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do. And then she left, and then it was like a month of me like just kind of like self-pity, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, just scrambling around what to do. Monmouth already ended. So then I had to go pack my house up in Florida and drive a 26-foot U-Haul up from Florida.
On your own?
Yeah, on my own. And so I drove down, I picked the car, I pick everything up, packed the U-Haul up. My dad and I packed it. I drove it myself. And the next morning I got here, and I went on my first long run ever in my life. And it was a 5-mile run. So
yeah, I wanted to ask you teed that up perfectly for someone who had this meniscus injury, and it was significant enough to put you out of your sport for a little bit. And then obviously that compounded with the timing of COVID. But what made you decide to run? Knowing that you had a knee injury, it'd be like the last, personally, I don't love to run, I'm not gonna lie, but it would be the last thing I would pick.
I'm on that drive from Florida, and it was a scary drive anyway. 26-foot U-Haul, things shaking, windy, and then like I got
up more than half the East Coast.
Yeah, half the East Coast. I'm just like, I don't know. I had a lot to think about, and a lot of self-reflection at that time too. I was just getting into listening to podcasts.
Okay.
And just listening to like some notable people and hearing like the knowledge that they put out, and then like learning about neuroplasticity and like the ability to change our minds like through like repetitive behavior and changing our habits and routines. So I'm like, man, maybe I need a routine. Maybe I need like to do something every day. Like, any
podcasts in particular jumping in your head that you
like definitely like would be like Joe Rogan's podcast, and like I love listening to like Rich Roll. They bring on some really great guys. These guys drawing a blank right now. It was on Rich Roll's podcast the other day that I was listening to, but he was speaking about neuroplasticity. He's the founder of Quest Nutrition.
Was it Tom Bilyeu?
Yep, there you go, Tom.
Yeah.
So it was awesome to hear, the science aspect of it, of like how our brains can change, and then hearing guys like Goggins who like they run their tail off, and that's how they got their results. And so
you go on that first long run when you get back.
Yeah. So
what was it like?
So I hear that balance between hard, like working your body out hard, and then also creating a habit, creating a balance.
Yeah.
So, or creating a routine, and together I can create a balance. So the next morning, as soon as I get back, go on my first long run. It's 5 miles, and I never ran over 3 before that. So I was like, man, that was great, and super. I felt really, really good, and like I felt refreshed, and I just felt really good. And then I was like, well, how can I get into this a little better? because now I'm sore, and stuff like, so then I got into like meditation walking. So you can like get an app, you put a Calm app is great. And I was doing the meditation walking, doing that. And it's just like,
it's a great way to get into meditation in a way that feels less intimidating. To go back to what I had said earlier about the misconception of like your mind has to be blank. I think there's more and more meditative apps that are available. Like another great one that I really like is this girl Mimi. It used to be called the Mimi Method, but now it's called Superhuman. And she has categories in her app that are specifically for walking meditations, or even she has one like that's for while you're cooking or getting ready for your day, a cleaning meditation. And I think it's a really, really cool way to show someone how accessible it could actually be.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're already doing that stuff anyway.
Yeah, and if you get into like the walking meditation, it's like it's just focusing on like what your body's doing, where you're putting your feet and stuff like that. And then I was like, I can apply this. And then I was feeling really good doing that. And I was like, let me apply this to running and being real focused on my steps. And, obviously pace was real slow at first, and then just started picking up distance. And it was just the distance was coming only because I was focusing so much on my form, focusing on how things are hitting and stuff like that. And then, next you're picking up distance, and it just became, for me, it's something I need every other day, or every 2 days to like release myself, you know what I'm saying? Like just to get an even keel. Otherwise, if I go a couple days without running, I'm a little stressed. My anxiety goes up. I'm angry. It's like I'm just a little more tense. And then like, my wife knows I'm like, I got to go out for a long run. So when I go visit her in Sweden, that was another thing. So I spent 4.5 months. So she left in September 2020. I spent 4.5 months over there when my son was born in January 2021. And, a lot, to go out for, to get some time by yourself too. You got to go out I want to go out for a run.
Especially as a new dad.
Yeah. So it was like go for a nice long run and come back home. And plus like she lives in the countryside in Sweden. So like,
I bet that's
the
beautiful.
roads are, but like if you're going to run from one loop,
quite a trek.
It's going to be a trek. Yeah. So it's, yeah.
So here you are a year and a half later, right? Not even. And you obviously have found this meditative quality in running, but now you're taking it to the next level to tie it back to why we were sitting down for this podcast today and why we're doing this specifically. You're about to partake in the now famous David Goggins challenge, the 4x4 by 48. So for those listeners out there who aren't familiar with it, tell us what you're going to do. And if you're listening to this right as it's being released in less than a week.
Right. So David Goggins put out a challenge called the 4x4 by 48. It's starting March 4th, 8 p.m. Pacific time. So it's going to be 11 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll be running my first run next Friday, March 4th at 11 p.m. Eastern time. Waking up for my second run 4 hours later, Saturday at 3 a.m. Then my third run, Saturday at 7 a.m. and so on. So, it's going to be, I'm excited to do it. We're raising money for Team Foster. I'm teaming up with Ford Athletic Club. And, I'm really excited to be, partnered up with Ford Athletic Club and Team Foster, and to just bring the community together a little better, and maybe a couple other little local businesses we can bring together and, make an event out of it and have a little fun and maybe get some people out of the house.
And, just in thinking about like that journey that, like I said, it's a year and a half is a pretty short amount of time. So if you think back to that drive in Florida, right, and that kind of being the catalyst for you finding running as a saving grace for you, why go to that extreme now to pick something like this challenge in particular? Was it the combination of the mental toughness? And even more so, the reason why I'm asking you this question is because of a comment you made way earlier in terms of the way jockeys like look at their training. You said you would have never even touched a weight, right? So like now we're talking like a really different end of the spectrum. Like, how do you think you arrived to this?
Was losing my identity as a jockey, and then recognizing that there's other things that I'm capable of doing. And it's like, you shouldn't define yourself of like just what you're good at, you know what I mean? And that's what I was doing. So it's like, I'm greater than that, and I felt greater than that, and I was like, let me just go do something else with myself. And watching other people on podcasts that, translated it towards running and stuff like that. So I kind of made my identity for a second of like, okay, I want to be this ultra runner, you know what I mean? And I want to just run and, inspire, and like maybe it gives me a little time to get out of horse racing, you know what I mean? So, Yeah, what brought it to me at this point, like right now, my business is real slow riding. Being up here north, being up north again for this winter, it's been tough.
This time of year, I would imagine it's always quiet, right?
Yeah, and it's just because I've been taking off so much time off work. The only time I really committed to riding full time over the past year has been Monmouth, and we had a great summer. But I need to go back and visit my son, and I need to go back and visit my wife. So
you're at a transition point in your life, right?
So
you said it earlier.
Yeah,
different things are becoming.
And any agents that I'm working with, I was working with up here in the north. They didn't want to work with me because later on, like I'm like, hey, in 2 weeks I got to go. Or a month from now I got to go visit my family. So I transitioned to like horse racing. The fitness, the running and stuff. That's kind of like turned into who I want to be, and then I can be that guy in our sport that does that, because if there's nobody else in our sport that does it, at least I can be the light to show other riders in our job that like, hey, you can do this too, or like you're going through something tough, like you know what I mean. Like I know people are struggling the same way I am in the sport, so there is an outlet, there is a way out of it. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, I love that. It's super powerful. And like I said, I was curious about just that transition from not even like the extreme, but it's like, it's really evident that when you want to commit to something, clearly you go all in on it, right? And that's obviously a really great segue back to the fort itself and what the fort stands for. Like one of our components of our mission statement and kind of our like tagline that we like to use is all in. And I think it's such a cool testament to know. And now that I've had this opportunity to sit down with you one-on-one, I say this about podcasting all the time, but it is just an art form that I think we almost have lost in terms of getting to know people, because when else do you get this kind of uninterrupted time? We don't have our phones on this table. Like we're actually looking at each other, and it sounds kind of silly when you point these things out, but we don't do them enough. No. And to tie that back to your relationship, like what has that been like for you in navigating that with your wife and the distance between you guys?
So the distance has been tough, and like I was never very good at keeping in communication, like unless like we're always right there. Physically together. So it was definitely changes that I needed to make, and like to make her feel more secure and like know that I love her. And now we have our routine where like she sends me a video every morning when her and Nikki wake up, because they wake up and obviously earlier than I do, the time difference. So at least when I wake up, I have a video to wake up to.
Nice.
And and then depending on how the morning's going, if Nikki's takes a nap, then her and we can do yoga. Or sometimes my mother-in-law will watch Nikki, and then we do yoga. So we set up.
Oh, you do like virtual yoga
together?
Yeah,
we do virtual yoga together. So we have like my phone on a tripod. Like we have iPad on a yoga block with the yoga app going, and then a tripod in front of that with my phone, FaceTiming me on the mat. So it's
love that.
So she can see the iPad, but we can also see each other. And then like when we go to like the final savasana, which she's doing prenatal yoga now.
Right.
And so when you do final savasana, she lays on her side. Mm-hmm. So it's nice that you put the iPad away, and then like I can put the camera right there, and then you close each other's eye. You close your eyes for 5 minutes, and you can feel like because when I'm there, we do yoga together, and like we hold each other's hand or something throughout savasana. So I get the same time you
that
can
same
feel
connection.
You can close your eyes, and like I'll go through a whole process of like breathing and like telling her like different parts of her body to relax, and like connecting with my daughter too, trying and and talking about the breath that that she's giving life to our daughter, and and that I wish I was there with them. And so it's a little tough being away from them, but we make it manage, and we still, everything's unsure of when she's gonna come back.
Right.
So it's we take it one day at a time. I think that's the only thing you can do at all in life, right?
And now as you're starting to think about like the next phase of your life and your family is growing, you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago and commenting about agents not necessarily wanting to work with you given the timeline that you're operating under. How is that kind of influencing the rest of your career as a jockey? Like, is it coming to an end? Where, like, how do you see that? Have you thought about that yet?
Yeah, you know what? Like, it almost, like, you don't want to tell yourself that, and you don't want, I think, like, words when the words leave your lips, you don't. It's hard to say. You know, it's like, you know, you kind of lose. You try not to lose your confidence. You know what I mean? But you got to understand, like, in horse racing, it is horse racing. So it's like it's only what's in between your legs, which, I mean, the horse. Like, it's like that's you can only do as good as the horse. You understand? So to pick up that business again, that's the reason why I'm looking at this also, to, like, you know, show people, like, although, because in this sport, out of sight, out of mind. So I've been out of sight. So to show people that, like, hey, I haven't been away. Like, I'm not doing just nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, like, sitting at home or whatever. Like, I've been putting in the work. I'm physically capable. I'm mentally capable. You know, I just need the opportunity. And that's why, like, for this David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge, we're raising money for Team Foster, and we're also raising money for the PDJF, which is the Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund. And so I'm bringing that to light because, you know, hopefully people in our industry can actually see, like, I'm doing a positive thing in my life and I'm physically ready, and hopefully going into the summer at Monmouth. I mean, maybe there's nothing we can do right now to pick my business up. I'm okay with that. You know, I'm just trying to keep my head above water until then. I just want to get to Monmouth and just hit the ground running and just keep this positivity and this mindset that I have right now. And to touch again on Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund, and to make this challenge a little more fun. So the challenge, there's 58 permanently disabled jockeys currently in the United States, and I believe, like, the 4x48 challenge, 4x4x48 challenge will consist of 48 miles altogether.
Yes. Matt and I did the math.
Yeah. So if we're approaching the goal is 48,000 to raise, and obviously it'd be 50-50 to Team Foster. The goal is that if we reach that $48,000 goal, I'll run an additional 10 miles for a total of 58 miles for the total number of permanently disabled jockeys presently in this country.
That's really
cool. I think it'd be a little extra, something fun to, you know, maybe we could raise more money, and you know, it's serious. You know what I mean? Like, in our job, you can lose it all in an instant. And
I mean, I would imagine, like, not to downplay your injury with your meniscus, but, like, shit, you said it yourself, it's a risky sport. You fall off a horse, you could be dealing with a lot more than that. So
yeah,
I can't imagine.
And I've witnessed, you know, some real bad accidents. Some real bad accidents. You know, we've had, you know, a couple people who have died in our sport over the past couple years. And, you know, the guys that come out to Monmouth Park, the permanently disabled jockeys, you know, majority are all in wheelchairs there. And so it's, and you know what they tell us, it's just like it happens so quick. Like, it happened in a blink of an eye. And so I just don't want to take life for granted and live every day to the best I can, you know, and keep to my routine. It's what keeps me sane and keep me moving. And yeah.
Well, I'm super excited for you, and I totally admire the fact that you really took this initiative upon yourself. Like, we talked about it, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months ago, and I forgot about it until you mentioned it to me again, not even 2 weeks ago. And you were like, I have this organized, I have that organized. What can we do here? I'm like, this is a slam dunk, because you were clearly so passionate about that. And I love that you're taking something that has really served you, bringing in the component of giving back via these two great charities. I don't think we mentioned, but for context, Team Foster supports veterans. Yeah. Yes. Totally cool. Which made perfect sense for the fort. We have ties on our own leadership team. There are a lot of veterans here who,
my family too.
Your family, your sister, right?
Yeah, my sister, she served in Afghanistan, the United States Marine Corps. My grandfather served in the Korean War. My aunt served in the U.S. Army. Wow. And my dreams were to be in the military prior to horse racing, but that's a story for another time.
All right. Yeah.
But
podcast number 2, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I mean, I could literally talk to you for hours, because I had anticipated, and this is what always happens, I was going to ask you some more specific nutrition questions about cutting weight and that sort of thing, but we can save that for another day too, because this has been fascinating, really eye-opening. And I feel like I've gotten to know so much more about you on a personal level, and I appreciate you opening up to me, but to the rest of the listeners for the fix. And I know that a lot of people are going to benefit from this story. But before we're totally done, there's one more section of the show that, if you maybe listened to any of my podcasts, you picked up on, but I like to do a little lightning round at the end just to kind of keep it fun. So it's like quick rapid fire questions, and then we'll make sure We tag all the places that people can connect with you. I'll put it in the show notes, and then the link for donating to Team Foster and to the Disabled Jockeys organization as well. So we'll make sure it's super accessible for people here too. So you ready for the lightning round?
Let's go.
All right, let's do it. Okay, we'll keep on the fitness theme. If you couldn't run, like, and you can only do one other fitness activity for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Cycling.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
I got into cycling. Really, I ran my first marathon in October in Stockholm, and ever since then, I have an itch to do an Ironman.
Okay.
So I really got into cycling training over the winter. But I guess if I couldn't do running either, I couldn't do it an Ironman. But
that's fair.
Yeah, but anyway, yes, but
Nice.
cycling. Yeah, I like cycling. You know what? I actually seen somebody like in the Stockholm Marathon, like with the some paraplegic that had the pedal one, and I was like, you know what? That's bad. Like that's pretty
really
badass.
cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was going up like a serious incline
No
too.
way.
I was like, man, like shout out to you, dude.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I did it, I
Talk
think
about
I'd still.
inspiration.
Yeah. So definitely, I was like, yeah. So I think it's cycling. I don't think I could stop moving.
I have no doubt that you put that out into the ether and just said that you have a goal to do an Ironman. We're going to be sitting here in like 6 months and Nick has his Ironman all planned out. So that's super cool. I'm excited for that for you. Let's see. We didn't really talk a lot about food, but what are your what's your go-to breakfast? Like we talked a little bit about your routine. Are there any other elements of your routine first thing in the morning that relate to that?
You know what? I gotta to plug them in, but yeah, first thing in the morning is athletic greens, and then I'm able to get through I messed around a little bit with intermittent fasting.
Okay.
The reason why I did that in the beginning was just to try it out, and you know what? I felt like not only did it help me stay away from food and stuff, but it also helped me make better decisions when I feel impulsive. You know what I mean? So I feel like intermittent fasting kind of brought me back to it makes me slow down a little bit and actually weigh my choices out. Okay, do I eat this, or I can wait 30 minutes and maybe I can just do a yogurt real quick, and so I can hit my 16 hours. So first thing in the morning, vitamins, athletic greens, and then try to do my 16 hours. And that's because I probably have to reduce weight, and it's easier to reduce fluid.
Mm-hmm.
Than it is a solid.
In terms of speed.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
If you aren't super concerned about your weight, let's say in the off season, but I'm sure it's something you're thinking about all the time, what are kind of your maybe guilty pleasure type foods?
Guilty pleasures are always my mother-in-law packs my suitcase every time I leave Sweden with the best Swedish candy. They have best chocolate.
Sure it's the chocolate.
Yeah, it's a chocolate and everything else. So it's I think that's what keeps me running too, because you have a long day. Sometimes you want a little piece of chocolate, and I indulge. So
there's no such, in my philosophy inside of my coaching program, there's no such thing as foods being inherently good or bad. We put that label on it. So I'm with you there.
I think so. It's all about moderation, and it's also what you're putting out that day. Obviously, if I'm having a recovery day and I'm not going to eat a bunch of crap, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to, because I know in turn, my body just doesn't feel good. Right. You know what I mean? The next day. So you kind of, you do. That's another thing. If you keep a journal, write down what foods make me feel good. And then you can work off of that and branch off, and you can make your recipes and stuff like that. But what are a list of foods that make you feel good, and then you can kind of make a shopping list off of that, make your week off of that.
So with you there, when I work with anybody in the first couple of weeks of us establishing that client relationship as their coach, I don't give them a lot of guidance, and it's on purpose because I want to see what your food preferences are. And figuring out what makes you feel good and what do you enjoy. And then let's actually build a nutrition plan that's around that, not these lists of shoulds and should nots based on what all these other external pieces of information are telling you. What do you actually like? It's really kind of overlooked. And I find it so fascinating that a lot of people, when they hire me, and that's kind of my directive for the first week, they're very unsure. And once I let them go through it and then explain why I did that, and then it finally clicks. But it's that sense of they want to be told what to do. And a lot of times that can actually completely kind of hurt you in the process, because it's not about the playbook of exactly how you should eat, because you and I wouldn't eat the same way. I don't train even remotely the way that you do. So we would have two really different nutrition plans for that exact reason. So it's cool how much time you clearly invest in figuring out what works for you. And you said it at the very beginning of the episode. just in talking about like a lot of trial and error when we were discussing coffee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of trial and error throughout life.
Yes.
Happens.
Yep. All right. I got one final question and then we'll officially let you go. So if you could have one piece of advice be taken away from this episode today, if somebody's gotten to this point, they've listened all the way through, what do you hope that they reflect on in listening to this conversation and learning more about you and your story and what it's like to grow up around horse racing and now redefining yourself in terms of running?
Like I said in the beginning too, is like my story I don't think is much different than many others. So if anybody's listening that has something similar, obviously you might not be a jockey or going through like some crazy situation and like a torn meniscus or dealing with your wife in Sweden or whatever, but we're all going through something, and it's just you got to keep moving forward and find the things that work for you, whether it's a list of like what types of foods that make you feel good. What type of things do you do that make you feel good? What did you do today? Like, I know what really changed me, what changed my behavior was keeping a journal. So what I'm trying to say is that anybody can do this. You know what I mean? Anybody can really start and change their life today. Go buy a journal from Target or order off Amazon. It'll be there in 2 days. You can start somewhere. There's a great journal on Amazon called the Legend Journal, and it starts off with like questions and like writing down affirmations and different ways you can plan goals throughout your life. And when you start there, like maybe you won't even keep up with it for 3 months, but like you got to start somewhere. And I just think like having that schedule can just really change your actions in your life. So like I said, anybody can do this. It's just starting out, and that's really the hard part.
It's so true. We'll love it. And to echo that statement, I hope that in listening to this, someone will feel inspired by your story, even if it isn't, as you're saying, like not that different. It's applicable to everybody for that exact reason. So again, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me to be able to share this with the listeners. It's so cool. And like I said, to have more of my day-to-day at the fort and the people that I get to see and interact with now trickle into this component of my life with the podcast is really special for me. So I'm super excited to continue to do that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Nik, tell us where we can connect with you on social media. Like I said, we'll link all of this down in the show notes. We'll definitely make sure that the link to make donations for the event is right there at the top too.
Yep, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Nik Juarez, NikJuarez. And hopefully we'll have the link up soon for the GoFundMe, and just really excited. And thank you so much for having me on. It's been a really great time. Hope we can do this again. And like you said, maybe it would be for an Ironman.
Yeah, for sure. We'll do a whole like play-by-play on Ironman training. We can get you in the fort doing some of your training too. My marketing brain is spinning a little
there we
bit
go.
for that. So we'll put that one in our back pocket. But from wherever you're listening from, you guys know the drill. Please, if you found any piece of value from this episode, share it with a friend. Tell somebody about it. The best thing you can do is text it directly to somebody. Sure, throwing it up on your Instagram stories is awesome, but it can be a great conversation starter. Maybe there's someone in your life where you don't know how to navigate certain conversations with them. A podcast may be a gateway to that, and I think that's a really special thing too. So share it, spread the word on the Fix, leave a review if you liked it, and we will catch you guys on our next episode. Thanks, Nik.
Thank you.